Sonic Generations for a time was the high watermark for the modern Sonic game, taking the boost gameplay that Sonic Unleashed did so well while swapping the Werehog for classic Sonic and leaning heavily on the nostalgia factor. It managed to do moderately well with critics, and it sold a few million copies in the process. Given that it did so well in the decade of Sonic sucks actually, that's no small feat. But replaying the game last year, I came away with a few issues with it. With the remake scheduled for late 2024 and a host of new game footage from the summer showcases, here are my hopes and fears for Sonic X Shadow Generations. Sega announced Sonic X Shadow Generations in January of 2024 to tie in with the Year of Shadow. What is the Year of Shadow? More than anything else, it's a promotional campaign gearing up for the third Sonic movie, which will feature everyone's favourite hedgehog edgelord. Sonic X Shadow Generations is probably the biggest tie-in with the movie, and it's a smart one too. Where the first Sonic the Hedgehog film didn't even have a tie-in game, and its sequel came several months between the Sonic Colors remaster and Sonic Frontiers, Shadow Generations will debut less than 2 months before the premiere of the new film, allowing a new generation to get acquainted with Sega's anti-hero. Sonic X Shadow Generations then is quite an interesting project to remaster. There's a playable Shadow which represents a new player character in the game and a new campaign. And then the rest of Sonic Generations is apparently being remastered for modern systems with various enhancements such as the drop dash from Sonic Mania. Now let's get the good out of the way first. Shadow's campaign so far looks like a load of fun. This is wholly new content which focuses on his escapades through Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic Heroes, Sonic 06 and his own eponymous Shadow the Hedgehog game from 2005. The gameplay looks solid, very similar to the cyberspace stages in Sonic Frontiers, which means a modern iteration of the boost gameplay template with a Shadow twist, refined to what I feel is near perfection. The bosses and stages shown so far really do tickle that 2000s nostalgia button, with those from Sonic Adventure 2 being well represented, especially with that Bio-Lizard boss looking disgustingly awesome. It's worth noting though that at the time that Sonic Generations is set, Shadow the Hedgehog's existence had only been half of that of Sonic's, and so with less historical games and content to fall back on, as well as a lack of a classic version of himself, I'd expect the new Shadow Generations content to be at most about half the length of the main Sonic the Hedgehog campaign. So with that in mind, we look to the remaster to see if this full game will be worth your 50 notes. And this is where I have concerns. You see, I own Sonic Generations 4 times. I have 2 disc copies for the Xbox 360, don't ask me why, but I also own the game on PC, which I bought at around the time of release. The game was also given away with Games with Gold on March 2020, so I also have the digital Xbox 360 version too. The Xbox Series X and S consoles not only upscale the Xbox 360 game through backwards compatibility, but they also give players an FPS boost option to play the game at 60 frames per second. Given both modern Xbox and PC players can play enhanced versions of the original console version of Sonic Generations, how much will they actually benefit from this remaster? And more to the point, how well has Sonic Generations aged? Now here's the thing, I played through Sonic Generations in November last year on Xbox Series X, and despite the uptick in frame rate and performance, I was left a little underwhelmed. What was once one of my favourite Sonic games of all time now felt a little clunky. It probably didn't help that the last time I played Sonic Generations was before I played the excellent Sonic Frontiers, and that launching in the interim essentially set a new benchmark for 3D Sonic gameplay, and then games like Sonic Mania and Sonic Superstars also underlined how flawed the classic Sonic gameplay is in Generations. Note to self, really must do some sort of review or retrospective on Sonic Frontiers for the channel at some point. Modern Sonic in Sonic Generations on the whole is fine. Following Sonic Colors and Sonic Unleashed, Sonic Team got the boost gameplay down fairly well. However, it's not quite perfect. Movement occasionally feels too loose and at odds with the stage design. I actually felt that on both Xbox and PC there were times where it didn't feel as responsive as it probably should, and there was noticeable input lag. Classic Sonic meanwhile is a comparatively painful experience. In 2011 it was interesting hearing constantly how Sonic doesn't work in 3D, and yet The 2D offering here was definitely the weaker part of Generations by a considerable margin. The biggest issue is that the physics are all wrong, even more so than Sonic the Hedgehog 4 in my opinion. Everything just feels off. The sense of momentum when Sonic is running isn't right, Sonic's acceleration feels too slow and heavy, bounce physics are incorrect, and there's too much of a reliance on that standing spin dash to pick up speed. Stage design for classic Sonic is a bit hit and miss as well. Like modern Sonic, there's some wonderful set pieces and some excellent moments, but in between there's some design that just feels obnoxious. Crisis City, for example, is the worst of these, almost living up to the level's original source material. Now, I'm not going to go over that line, because the gameplay really isn't that bad in Sonic Generations. Modern Sonic was great in 2011, and Classic felt passable. Now, however, they feel a little bit clunky. And why? Because we've redefined the series since. Sonic Frontiers gave us a new standard in 3D gameplay. Sonic Mania, meanwhile, took 2D Sonic back to its roots, which allowed Sonic Superstars to take the baton and apply classic 2D gameplay to a whole new 2D adventure, but with modern visuals. And as a result, the original Sonic Generations feels a bit out of step. Sonic's video game landscape is very different from when the Sonic Colors remaster launched quite a few years back, and even that remaster had its issues. And this is really exacerbated by how the latest games are an evolution of what Generations was actually trying to achieve, so they suffer directly by comparison. It's not like the adventure games, which hold up a little better because they play so differently to the modern titles. So, Sonic X Shadow has some significant challenges ahead of it. Firstly, it needs to be better and less glitchy than the Sonic Colors remaster. Now, in my personal experience, the bugs in Colors were minimal, but there's no doubt that the lack of polish was amplified on social media, and that's something this remaster should really look to avoid. Thankfully, Generations seems to be a much tighter package from what we've seen so far, but the remaster efforts themselves appear to be far more muted, with some wondering whether the game has been remastered at all. But most importantly, it needs to deliver a compelling gameplay experience. It looks like we'll get some of that from the brand new Shadow gameplay, which looks great so far, as well as the new Chao missions. But given the escapades of the two versions of Sonic the Hedgehog will no doubt get the most screen time, we have to wonder whether the gameplay of both flavours of Sonic will get enough polish from a gameplay perspective to elevate the aging structure. We know that both characters are getting the drop dash, but from the footage so far, it would appear that classic Sonic still suffers from the same wonky physics model as the original, which will certainly not stand up to modern scrutiny in a post-Sonic Mania world. At the time of recording, there are under 4 months until Sonic X Shadow Generations lands. And given the proximity to the next instalment of the well-regarded live-action film series, it needs to land just right in order to maintain the momentum Sonic has experienced since the first Sonic movie brought forth this new Renaissance era. Will it be enough? And will it be worth the asking price of £50? Will it give the Blue Blur the momentum he needs to maintain a buzz as Sonic's film series becomes a trilogy? And will they modernise some of these outdated gameplay aspects? Shadow Story, Chaos and Drop Dashes are all good, but if the rest of the game we're getting is nearly indistinguishable from the 13-year-old original, it may erode some of the goodwill that the series has built up recently. My hope is that there's enough polish to bring one of Sonic's most beloved adventures into the modern age, but unfortunately there's also plenty of room for disappointment. This has been Dan the Mega Driver of the Sega Guys, and we will see you on the Sega side.